actual sales, which here is 40, our actual sales is 40, the break-even point is 25. The difference between the 40 and the 25 is the margin of safety. So it shows how far we are to the break-even point. So that is kind of a cushion that brings safety to the organization. Obviously, organizations, they want to be as far as possible from the break-even, because if they're very close to the break-even, any small change means that they might start incurring into losses. So we want to be as far as possible to the break-even, so that even if there's any crisis, any problem with demand, with products, with sales, the company is safeguarded, has this cushion in order to absorb any changes in demand. So the margin of safety, we can calculate this both in quantity, in units, and in monetary terms. So it is the expected sales. So in the graph that we have here, that is 40 minus the break-even, which is 25. So we can do that in units, or we can do that in euros. So in euros would be the amount of euros in terms of expected sales minus the amount of euros in break-even point. There's two concepts then for the margin of safety in terms of ratio. We call it the margin of safety 1 and the margin of safety 2. So the margin of both of them are the margin of safety in ratio. So we can calculate margin of safety in quantity, in monetary terms, and we can calculate it a margin of safety in ratio with two formulas. So margin of safety 1 is when we make the difference expected sales minus break-even sales divided by the break-even sales. And this basically shows by how much sales are above the break-even point. And we have then the margin of safety 2, in where we make the difference between expected sales minus break-even sales, but we divide it by the expected sales. And this shows us how much sales may decrease before a loss occurs. Okay, so this is the two margin of safety ratios that we have here. So as you expect, we want to have a higher margin of safety, because that means that the company is less risky to incur into a loss if there is any changes in activity level. As the higher the margin of safety, the best for the organization. The safer, the less risky the organization is. Any questions? No? So now we have another quiz, very quick. So this is like a continuation from the previous quiz where we did with the break-even point, but now with the margin of safety. So we have here that the sales unit price is 15 euros. The variable unit cost is 5 euros and the total fixed cost is 5,000. The break-even point in quantity is 500, which you guess on the previous quiz. And the company is selling 900 units. So how much is the margin of safety in quantities? So have your calculators there at hand.
Sorry, Professor, my options, I don't have the options to select. I don't know why.
You don't have options to select?
Yeah.
You see the pool?
Yeah. No, I don't have the pool.
No, yeah, me neither.
Yeah, me neither.
That is strange. But are you on your mobile or are you on laptop?
Laptop.
No, laptop, yeah.
That's strange because I have some students answering. So that's okay. You don't answer the pool, but you can look the calculations. And if you want, you can write in the chat your answer. Okay, I don't know what is the... What's not
near the chat icon, don't you have an option that says polls? I have it, and it is there, the poll.
What? Sorry, can you repeat?
down in near chat and participants, don't you have another icon saying polls?
Yes. Do you have that?
No, no, I don't have it.
No, me neither.
It doesn't appear.
Neither do I.
And those who have, for those who are able to see and answer to the poll, do you see the icon polls down there next to chat and participants?
Yes.
Yes.
I have the pool, but I don't see it.
Yeah, me too. I have the pool, but I can't have the icon.
And on the previous ones that we did earlier today, you could do it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, in the previous, it appeared automatically.
And now it's not appearing. Well, I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about that. So it's just, if you want, you can answer here on the chat. Okay. But I will now close the pool. So let's see if you can see the results. Can you see the results?
No.
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 Yes.
Okay, some people can see, others cannot see.
I can.
Well, so most of you, so 92% answered option C. So most of people answered option C. Let's see if that is the right option. And that is the right option. So we had that the break-even point was 500 units. If you are selling 900 units, to get the margin of safety in units, in quantity, we just make the 900 minus the 500, and that gives us the 400 units. Okay? Is it clear for everyone? Yep. So we will have another pool later, and hopefully it will work for everyone. So now we're going to talk about the operating leverage. So the degree of operating leverage we can calculate by taking the contribution margin and divide it by the profit. It's a measure of the sensitivity of profits to a change in the value of sales. So this is also similarly to the contribution margin ratio. This is also very important metric for organizations to use when they want to have very quickly see the sensitivity of profits to a change in the value of sales. So basically, when we have a high operating leverage, it means that the company is using a lot of fixed costs in the operations. So if we look at the formula, pay attention, the formula is contribution margin divided by profit. Remember the structure of the P&L with the contribution margin format. Have sales revenues, then minus variable costs, minus fixed costs. When we divide the contribution margin ratio by the profit, we are basically seeing how much is the weight of the fixed costs. So when we have a high operating leverage, it means that we are using a lot of fixed costs in the operations. So we can see here this example. So if you have a contribution margin of 5,000 euros and a profit of 10,000 euros, the operating leverage, making the calculations, contribution margin divided by profit is 5 euros. So if the operating leverage is 5 euros, when we have a 6% increase in sales, this would translate into a 30% increase in the net operating income, in profit. So how do we calculate? We have there profit. So the impact on profit we can calculate as 5, which is operating leverage, times the percentage increase in sales, which means that a change in profit would be 30%. So if sales increase by 6%, then profit will increase by 30%. So this, again, is a very quick way for organizations to measure the sensitivity to profit when there is a change in sales. So this is very important for organizations to calculate, to have an idea of how the business stands. Note, however, that the degree of operating leverage is not constant. As we grow, as we move along away from the break-even, it diminishes. Okay, so the contribution margin ratio, because the contribution margin is only sales revenues minus variable costs. Both of them depend on the level of activity, and we divide it by profit. So when we look at profit, profit takes into account the fixed costs. Fixed costs, they do not change with changes in the level of activity. Therefore, as we move away from the level of activity, the degree of operating leverage diminishes, decreases. Okay? So then we can look at organizations in terms of operating leverage. So when we have labor-intensive organizations, these have high variable costs and low fixed costs. So if they have low fixed costs and high variable costs, means that they have low operating leverage. So this is example that we have here on the left-hand side of the slides. We have labor-intensive organizations, they have high variable costs, low fixed costs, therefore a low operating leverage. If a company has low operating leverage, it means that it will have a low volatility in profits. So if there is a crisis, the volatility in profits will be small. So it means that the business is less risky. Okay? Then we have other type of companies which are capital intensive organizations. So this capital intensive, on the contrary of labor intensive, means that they require a lot of capex, a lot of machinery. So there's a lot of machinery involved in the production process. So these companies, they have low variable costs and high fixed costs, meaning that they will have a high operating leverage and therefore high volatility in profit. So these are very sensitive to changes in sales. So changes in sales will imply huge impact in profit. Okay, so let's see some examples of organizations. So when we look at organizations like McDonald's, Pizza Hut, these are mostly with high variable costs and they have low fixed costs. Therefore, they have a low operating leverage. So even in times of crisis, they continue to report profits. Okay, if there's fluctuations in the sales level, they still have profits because they can decrease the costs. So a lot of the costs that they have are variable. So they can hire variable labor, so they hire labor according to the demand, so they easily hire and lay off people. In terms of ingredients, they have low fixed cost, which is basically the rent of the buildings and some machinery, but not that much. On the other hand, when we look at airlines or car manufacturers, which involve huge machinery, fixed costs, like these are capital intensive. So they for instance, when you look at airlines like EasyJet or other airlines, some airlines even went bankrupt. You heard that in the news in the last few months with the crisis. The demand or the sales is decreasing substantially for airlines, and many of them went bankrupt, and the others which didn't go bankrupt is because they are having help from the governments. So most of these airlines, so they have a huge capex with airplanes, so these have a high operating leverage. The same goes for car manufacturers. When we look at the plants of car manufacturers, so it's huge plants, manufacturing plants with a lot of capex there, all the machinery, all the robots to produce the cars. So this involves a very high capital intensive business. Therefore, these businesses are more risky. Okay, so they are more volatile. They are more sensitive in terms of profit when there is a change in the sales volume. Any questions on operating leverage? No? So now we have another quiz. Okay, so let's see if it works now for everyone. So this one is for you to put again the boxes that we have at the bottom in the boxes that we have in the table. So let me launch the quiz. So I have now started the quiz. Can everyone see the pool?
No.
I can't.
No.
No.
Can anyone? So some people can see it at least.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can.
Okay, so some people can see, others cannot see. I have no idea of why that is. So, but basically we want to put the boxes from the bottom in the boxes that we have there in the table. So box A, changes in sales volume causes a smaller change in profit. So we can look at operating leverage, looking at the cost structure of the organization, and also at how changes in the volume affects change in profit. So the cost structure basically is in terms of fixed and variable costs. When we have cases of high operating leverage and low operating leverage. So if you cannot see the pool, you can at least answer in the chat if you want. So box A, change in sales volume causes a smaller change in profit. So would that be high operating leverage or low operating leverage? Box B, we have high fixed costs and low variable costs. So is that high operating leverage or low operating leverage? Box C is the other way around, low fixed costs and high variable costs. And box D is change in sales volume causes a larger change in profit. So box D, change in sales volume causes a larger change in profit. So is that high operating leverage or low operating leverage? Okay, just a few seconds for you to finish answering.
Professor, can you just read again the D one? Because you appear in front and I can see.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Change in sales volume causes a larger change in profit. Okay? Everyone who sees the pool answered? Okay, I will finish the pool now. Let's see the results. So, box A. Most of people said 79% said it is box 4. So that is correct. So when we have a smaller, when sales volume causes a smaller change in profit, is a case of low operating leverage. Very good. Then box B, most of you, 79% said it is A. Again, correct, very well. So when we have high fixed costs and low variable costs, that is a case of high operating leverage. And then box C, 83% mention it is box 2, and that is correct. So when we have low fixed costs and high variable costs, is low operating leverage. And finally, in box D, 79% said it is box 3, and that is the only one that we have remaining, and that is also correct. So when we have that when change in sales volume causes a larger change in profit is a case of high operating leverage. Very good. Any questions? No questions? Okay, so just to sum up CVP analysis assumptions. So I mentioned earlier today that when we do this kind of analysis, this cost, volume, profit analysis, we are taking into account important assumptions. So we started by looking at this curvilinear graph, and then we made an important assumption, which was looking at it only within the relevant range in which we have a linear graph, right? Now, what are the assumptions that we need to take into account when we do this kind of analysis? First is that volume is the only factor that causes costs and revenues to change, meaning that all other variables remain fixed, remain constant in terms of the sales mix, in terms of the efficiency of production, in terms of price levels, in terms of the methods of production. So all of these remains constant during the period of analysis. So let's imagine that the company decides to purchase a new machine. With the new machine, the efficiency or the production methods and the efficiency in the production might change. And therefore, we need to do the calculations with the new data. Okay, we cannot use data from last year. It does not make sense to use contribution margin from last year because this year the information is different. We are within a different environment and we have an improved production process. Okay, so this is an important assumption. Next, we have that we have either a single product or a constant sales mix. Okay, so you remember when we did the product mix, when calculating the break-even, we did the product mix, the percentage, the 25% product X, 75% product Y. So we are assuming that this remains the same during the period of analysis. Okay, and this is really, an important assumption because, as you know, for many companies there are changes. So let's imagine a company that sells detergents, detergents to clean the house. So maybe now with the pandemic, the mix of products changed because before probably people were focusing more on one type of products, detergents to clean the house. Now they're focusing on another type of products because they want a special product to kill the germs and bacteria, etc. Okay, so the mix of products that they sell probably change. They now sell more of one product and less of the other. So if we have these very big changes in the mix of products, we cannot do the CVP analysis because it won't make sense, okay? Won't be accurate. Another one, or the third one, is total cost and total revenues. They are linear functions of output. So if we increase output, total cost, total revenues, they will increase in a linear function, okay? It's not like curvilinear. Then we have that costs can be accurately divided between fixed and variable. And these also, as we saw before, we can also have other types of costs. We can have semi-variable costs and step fixed costs. But when we are doing CVP analysis, we are basically assuming a very clear distinction between fixed and variable. We are assuming that profits are calculated on a variable costing basis, okay? And this analysis applies over the range, the relevant range, only for the short term, okay? And also we are assuming that the units produced are the same as the units sold. There is no changes in inventory, in the inventory level. Okay, so these are the assumptions that we have when doing CVP analysis. So these are very strong assumptions, so we need to be careful when doing this kind of analysis in organizations. All right, so just to keep this in mind, it's very powerful tool for organizations, but we need to be careful because of the assumptions. So let's imagine we can do this with data from last month, if last month is very similar to this month, but maybe we cannot do the calculations with data from 1 year ago or 2 years ago because the conditions, the circumstances might have changed dramatically. So we need to be careful with these kind of assumptions. Any questions? No? Okay, so that means that we are now moving to the next topic, which is to measure relevant costs and revenues for decision making. So we have now moved from cost volume profit analysis, and we are now going to measuring relevant costs and revenues for decision making. I will make available on Moodle a quiz on CVP analysis. Okay, so you can, this will be optional, and you can practice that at home later on. So the objectives on this topic is to recall the concepts of relevant and irrelevant costs and revenues, as well as opportunity costs. And we want to analyze this type of decisions, special selling price decisions, product mix decisions when we have capacity constraints, decisions on the replacement of equipment, outsourcing decisions, and discontinuation decisions. So, relevant costs. In order to establish the costs that are relevant for the decision that we want to make, we have to understand two things. So first we need to understand the business scenario. Okay, so if we want to make a decision, and to make that decision we need information, and obviously there's a lot of information available around the world. But we only want to have relevant information for that decision that we want to make. And in order to select which information is relevant, sorry about that, we had here a small technical problem. So let's see if it works now. Okay, so we need to understand the business scenario. Okay, so we need to understand how the business works, what are the way that we have in the company of producing, of selling. We need to understand the competition. We need to understand the market, the industry. So we need to have this broad understanding of the business. And we need to clearly define the decision. Because very often people have ideas. And we saw this on the movie, The Tucker. They had a lot of ideas and they needed to make decisions. And very often when people, have so many ideas and they need to make decisions, sometimes they think it's so much that brings confusion. There is not clarity in the mind of people on what is the specific decision that they need to take at the moment. So they might have so much information available, so many things to take care of, that they are just blurred. They are not clearly defined what needs to be done at the moment. So these are two important points that we need to have clear when you want to do this, to this type of analysis, to see what is relevant when we want to make a decision. So we need to understand the business scenario, and we need to identify what is the decision that we need to make. Okay, we will see an example later on this. So I included here on the slides the skills that we will be practicing with this kind of topic. So when we go to job interviews, and you can identify these in your CV, in your LinkedIn profile. And if in the job interviews, anyone asks, you can say, I practiced this in the course of managerial accounting, okay? So we will have to develop this ability to work with information, because as we have so much information available, when we want to understand what kind of information is relevant, so we are developing this ability to work with information, to understand the business case, to evaluate the business options with both financial and non-financial data, and also we will be more confident in making business decisions, which is very important if you remember the video from Sima last week. Now I will share with you this video with the 10 worst business decisions of all time. So let me see if I can share the video, if it will work. So just bear with me and let me know if it does not work. Okay. Just a second for me to find where the video is. Okay, if it does not work, let me know, okay? So playing the video now. There is over 400,000 complaints, and the shares fell 1.4%. The nice thing is that the turnover is Star Wars merchandising for 20,000. And today, this is valued over 30 billion. Blockbuster projected in 20,000 Blockbuster declined, struggling Netflix after at 50 million. 15 years later, Blockbuster passed 9,000 stores, and Netflix was worth $100 million. Number 7, market So this is expected and increased by 60%. Number 6, in 1876, many people from West Indies going on 100,000 there was no commercial possibility to know what happened to nobody. We have the sale of Pixar. When we went to Pixar, bought Pixar. 20 years later, bought Pixar almost 1,500 times higher. Kodak and the digital camera. So Kodak created the digital camera, but they kept quiet when they went bankrupt. The three Apple co-founders held the shares. So they sold the shares in 1976 for $800. And 75 the shares were valued $2.7 million, and today is $5 million. When Apple rejected they said and we know the success of other things. One time we rejected Google. So Yahoo has Google twice. And these are
Hey guys, that was the 10 worst business decisions of all time.
decisions. So let me go back to the slides. So we don't want to be that kind of managers that make these kind of bad business decisions, right? So that is why we are learning. That's why we are learning these relevant costs and revenues in order to get the right information to make decisions and avoid making bad decisions. So let's go back to the slides. So when we want to make decisions, we want to make informed decisions. So we have to have this cost-benefit analysis, which involves measuring, weighting up the benefits against the costs, both financial and non-financial. So when we look at the benefits are the outcomes from a course of action aimed at achieving business objectives. And the costs is the amount of resources, normally in monetary terms, that we need to sacrifice in order to achieve the objective. So benefits is the outcomes, costs is the resources that we need to sacrifice for that objective. So when we're doing these type of analysis, we want to classify costs in how they relate to a specific decision. And we can classify into them into relevant and irrelevant costs. So how do we distinguish between relevant and irrelevant? We answer to the question, will the cost change the decision under the consideration? So if we take this decision, will the cost change? If it changes, it's relevant. If it does not change, it means that it's irrelevant. So relevant costs are those future costs and revenues that will be changed by a decision. And irrelevant costs are those that will not be changed by a decision. So to be a relevant cost, it needs to follow three conditions. So it must differ from one possible decision outcome to the next. So let's imagine we have to make a decision between producing product A or product B. So depending on the product, we want to see what are the relevant costs. So if you produce product A, we have costs with this and that. If we produce product B, we have also cost with this because maybe it's the same materials, maybe it's the same labor, but we will have a different cost with something else. So in order for a cost to be relevant, it has to be different between both alternatives. So the costs that remain the same with two alternatives, they are not relevant. But the costs that change between the two alternatives, those are relevant in our decision between the two options. These costs must relate to the future. It needs to be costs that we are going to incur to sacrifice in the future. It's not cost that we already had in the past. Okay, it has to be related with the future. Because notice, if we're going to make a decision between producing product A and product B, so it only makes sense to analyze costs that I will have in the future. Because if it's costs that I already incurred in the past, they will not change in the future. If I choose one or other option, the costs from the past, they have been incurred already, so they will not change in the future. And the third condition is that they have to have an impact on the cash flow. Okay, so there needs to be an impact in the cash flow of the business for the cost to be relevant. Note that the notion of sunk cost is also important. Okay, for the concept, and these sunk costs, which is the cost that occurred in the past, is irrelevant cost. But not all irrelevant costs are sunk costs. Okay, we will define it better next. But before that, I have here a quiz. Okay, so let's see if the pool will work now. So we have here the pool. Company A will buy a new machine to pack the finished products and needs to decide between two models of machines. The company A has various employees who are suitable to operate either model of the new machine. So first, before choosing the options, what is the decision under consideration? Who can say what is the decision? That they have, what do they have to decide about?
Which machine to buy?
Which machine to buy. So the question is not, will we buy the machine or not? They already have made that decision, okay? So now they are further ahead. they are comparing between one machine and the other, which machine to buy. Okay? So for this decision, what is the relevant cost? The rent of the factory is relevant to choose which machine to buy. The salaries paid to the factory employees, the price of the machine, the number of products produced. So a few more.
I just had one question. The number of products produced was like per machine, per model, or was not that question?
Okay, so this is a very good question, because if we think about this option, number of products produced, and if we think about it, is it the capacity of the machine? Okay, how much units each machine can produce? That is one way of understanding the point. Another way of understanding, which is the one that we consider here, is how much units the company produces. Okay, independently of the machine.
Okay, I consider the first one, but okay, no problem.
Okay, if we consider the first one, it becomes relevant. So I will now finish. I will finish the pool. I will show how much. Let me share the results. So 93% answered option C. We did have 37% choosing option D. The correct option was option C, but the question that you received was very relevant, because if the option D, number of products produced, if this was to mention the capacity of each machine, so one machine has capacity to produce 1,000 products and the other to produce 100 products, it would be relevant. Okay, so that would be irrelevant. But number of products is not a cost. Okay, it would be relevant for the decision, but is not a cost. Number of products is just a feature that is relevant to have into consideration, but is not a cost. But it's relevant if we are looking at it as the capacity of the machine. But here we're just saying the number of products produced, like how much the company produces independently of new machine, old machine, of the two machines they were looking to buy. Okay, is it clear? Yeah, everyone understood the trick here. So we are looking at the relevant cost, and notice that number of products, even though if we are considered as the capacity of the machine, is not cost. Okay, so therefore we could the number of products does not bring any change in the cash flow. It's a relevant feature that we have to take into account, but it is not considered a cost. Any questions? No? Okay, so let's look at relevant costs. We have here 3 types of relevant costs. One is opportunity cost. I'm sure you have heard about opportunity costs before. So opportunity cost is a measure of the benefits sacrificed when one course of action is chosen in preference to another. So we can measure the opportunity cost as the lost contribution margin. Okay, so for instance, if we have limited capacity and we have clients for the 2 products, product A and product B, and we decide to produce and sell product A and not produce and sell product B. So it is part of the cost of product A that we decided to sell product A, the lost contribution margin from product B. Okay, so when that is an opportunity cost. When we decide to produce and sell product A, we have to stop producing and sell product B. The lost contribution margin from product B needs to be considered as an opportunity cost of product A. So these costs arise only when we have scarce resources. Because if we can produce as much as we want, we can produce and sell A plus B plus C. We don't have an opportunity cost. Only when we have scarce resources and we have to make these options between producing and selling one or the other, we consider the opportunity cost. Then we have avoidable costs. Avoidable costs, these are also relevant costs, and these are costs that can be saved by not adopting a given alternative. So if I choose to produce product A, I'm not producing product B, but when I produce product B, I would be using materials that were specific to product B, but because I'm not producing product B, I can avoid these costs. So I will not need to buy the materials needed to produce B because I'm not producing B. Okay, so these are avoidable costs. This is relevant when I consider the cost, the two options, when I'm comparing the two options of product A and product B, I have to consider opportunity costs and also these avoidable costs, costs that I can avoid by choosing another alternative. And then we have future outlay costs. So these future outlay costs are those costs that, future costs that vary with the decision. So if I decide to produce and sell product A instead of product B, for product A, let's imagine product A requires a specific sales channel. Let's imagine I'm a restaurant, and if I sell product A, this requires the delivery services. So I have to when I do the calculations, I need to include the costs of the delivery services. And if I sell product B, I can deliver it myself. It does not require any special delivery methods, so I don't incur in these costs. So these are future outlay costs examples. Then we have here examples of irrelevant costs. So one, what you mentioned before, is this sunk costs. These are past or historic costs. These are costs that have been incurred in the past, and they do not affect the future. Okay? No matter which product I decide to sell, A or B, the costs that I incurred in the past will not change because they have been incurred already. Okay? So this is irrelevant. These type of costs are irrelevant. Then we have unavoidable costs. These are costs that cannot be avoided, cannot be saved by a decision. So if I'm choosing between product A and product B, and I already have contracted with the suppliers the materials for product B, and by contract I have to buy or to pay these materials no matter if I produce or not product B, these are unavoidable costs. So I will not consider them in my analysis, in calculating the relevant costs. These are irrelevant. No matter which options I choose, I have to pay, have to incur in these costs. These are unavoidable. And then we have committed costs. So these are also future costs that have been committed, like the example that I gave you on the contract. So when the committed costs, they have been set in contract, like the rent. Also, we have to pay the rent of the store, of the factory. We have the contract with the landlord. Can be, for instance, with the insurance, and we have to pay the insurance, or we have, for instance, the telecommunications with internet, where we have to have this 2 years payment period. These are future costs that have been committed in the past, and I cannot just stop paying them. Okay, so these are also costs that are irrelevant. Any questions? No? So this is just definitions. So we want to have this idea of relevant costs for decision making, for decisions. So what kind of decisions we are talking about? We are talking about pricing decisions. We are talking about product mix decisions when we have capacity constraints. We are talking about decisions on replacement of equipment, which machine should we buy a new machine or not. We're talking about outsourcing decisions and discontinuation decisions. We also will be using this concept of relevant costs and revenues to calculate relevant cost of materials and relevant costs of labor. So now I will ask you to go to Moodle, and you will have there a quiz on Moodle. We have there a quiz on Moodle. Let me open the quiz on Moodle. Let's see if it works. So that you should be able to see there on week 2, which is today, the mandatory activities below the problem that you made earlier today. You should see there the link for this quiz too. And it is a quiz that you have to answer on Moodle, okay? There you have the different costs, and you have to assign in the sentences what type of cost they're talking about. So I will
Professor,
give you a few
it
minutes.
says that it's expired, that the finish date was
Is expired. Let me check.
yeah. Yesterday, so.
It expired yesterday.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay. So today. So there is a time limit of 10 minutes, okay? Let me change here the settings, and let's see if it works. Can you try now to see if it works?
It works.
Oh, great. Thank you. So 10 minutes, okay? You don't need the 10 minutes. You can make it before that. I see most people have already finished the quiz.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I had a sudden, unexpected situation here at home, and I now realize that we have a quiz going on. How much time? Excuse me for this, but how much time do we have?
So the quiz is 10 minutes, but you can just make it in a few minutes.
Okay. How long ago did it start?
It started a few minutes ago. I did not see what time it was exactly.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you.
So if you go to Moodle, it's very quick. It's just putting in the boxes the type of costs. So just a few more minutes for those to finish submitting the quiz. So almost everyone already submitted. Okay, is everyone finished with the quiz?
No, could you wait 3 minutes, please?
Okay.
Almost done.
Is everyone ready to continue? Yep.
Can you give just one more minute, please? I'm almost finished.
Okay. Are we all ready now? Yeah. Okay, so let's continue. Let's continue now with this example. So we have here an example of a real world example when we talk about relevant costs and irrelevant costs. So we will read this together, and then I want you to think about the question that we have there on the right. So in July 2005, Manchester City transferred one of its young players, Sean Wright-Phillips, the England international, to Chelsea for £21 million. City has signed the player 8 years earlier, when he was 15 years old, on a free transfer after Nottingham Forest had released him having decided that he was too small to make professional footballer. In 2008, Chelsea sold the player back to City for a fee believed to be around 8.5. So notice in July 2005, City sold to Chelsea by 21 million, and in 2008, a few years afterwards, Chelsea sold the same player again to City by 8.5. During these 3 seasons with Chelsea, Wright-Phillips started only 43 games, though he was brought on as a substitute in some more. As the transfer fee from Chelsea to City was rather less than half of the amount originally paid, Chelsea made a huge loss on the transaction. However, to have agreed to transfer, Chelsea must have viewed the offer of 8.5 million from City as being greater than the sacrifice or cost of losing Wright-Phillips services. The original amount paid for the player's services should not have been a factor in arriving at the agreed transfer price. So what I want you now to comment is at the factors that might influence Chelsea to sell the player at this lower price. So they sold back to City in 2008 by 8.5 million when they bought the player earlier, 3 years earlier, by 21 million. So what do you think were the factors in terms of when you think about relevant and irrelevant costs? What are the factors that might have influenced this decision from Chelsea. So we have here Gonçalo with a hand up.
I would say, first of all, how much would be the salary of Wright Phillips for the company throughout the next years, and probably they could see that it would be beneficial for Chelsea to sell it for 8.5 million instead of having to pay his salary throughout the next years.
Okay, so one of the things that they must have into account, if I understood you correctly, is the salary that they would pay in the future. Okay. Next person with hands up is José.
I think his value might have been perceived to be decreased because he played very few games in the course of 3 years, especially after being bought for such a high value. It can be perceived as it doesn't have the potential they believed he had before, or the capacity, because he only played 43 games over 3 years, which is very little.
Okay. Who else wants to comment? So about the 21 million, what kind of cost is it?
Irrelevant.
Irrelevant cost. So the 21 million is a cost that occurred in the past. So that should be considered what kind of irrelevant costs?
Sunk cost.
A sunk cost. Very good. So the 21 million that they paid in the past is a sunk cost, and what they have to consider for the future is the future cost that they will incur if they keep the player against, so the costs against the benefits. So probably they see that the costs that they will incur if they keep the player are higher than the benefits that they will get. So if they have the decision, should we sell? We sell the player now by 8.5, or we keep the player. If we sell the player, we will stop incurring costs with salary, etc., and we will receive the 8.5. And if we keep the player, we will not receive the 8.5. Now we will be paying the salary and have the costs with maintaining the player during the future, and we might have revenues if we keep the player. They analyzed the performance of the player over the last few years. They saw that the player was not participating in that many games, and therefore they conclude, or they draw the assumptions that the player would not bring benefits in the future that would compensate for the 8.5 million. So let me see if anyone here on the chat said something else. In the meantime, anyone else wants to turn on the mic?
I think maybe it was better for Chelsea to sell him for 8.5 million in 2008 than, I don't know, selling him for 5 million in 2011 if he gets even worse.
Mm-hmm.
That's maybe one more reason.
Yeah, so they would trying to predict the performance in the future. Good. I have here some people in the chat, Frederick, mentioning that opportunity cost of letting him go for free a year after, so maybe not having that much in the future, decreasing like we just heard from Tim. Philippe, do you want to turn on the mic?
Yes, they can use the 8.5 million to buy another player that can deliver higher performance for the team.
Exactly. So they have these. If they get the 8.5, they might use this to choose another player who they will expect to perform better, to provide a better performance compared to this specific player. Very good. And we have here Manuel talking about the amortization of the player as an active, as an asset, probably is what we mean. So notice that the depreciation of assets is something that does not involve cash flow. Okay, amortization, depreciation does not involve cash flow. If you remember the three conditions for relevant cost, one of them is to change cash flow. Okay, so although this might be interesting, okay, we bought the player earlier, because if we register the player as an asset and we depreciate the player, the value of the player, the value of the asset, maybe it's not a loss. Okay, so we look at the current value that we have registered in the books. So that might be something, but just to notice that the depreciation is not does not involve cash flows as such, is not considered as a relevant cost. But I think I understand what you mean. Okay, very good. Now, so just before we finish, let's go through this example. Anyone else wants to participate before we go to this example? No? So we have here this example. Let's consider a company that is managing the construction of a new warehouse. Construction is well underway, and the construction costs made up to date amount to 2.5 million. A structural engineer has just discovered a major design flaw, and the flaw in the current design can be corrected and the project completed for additional 4 million. Or the current construction can be demolished and the new warehouse built for a total of 3 million. So we have here a decision. We have to choose between two alternatives. So what are the alternatives that we have to decide?
Between correcting the problem or build a total new by demolishing what is done already.
Very good. So the first thing that we need to do is to identify clearly the decision that we have to make. Once we have identified the decision, and here we have the decision between repair what we have, correct the project, and demolish what we have done so far and build a brand new warehouse. So we have these two options. So these are the decision that we have. The decision we have to make is to decide between one option or the other. Now, then we have that one option of correcting the problem costs 4 million, and the option of demolishing and build a new warehouse will cost 3 million. So which option should the company choose?
I would say build a new warehouse.
Build a new warehouse. Anyone else? We have people with hands up.
Yeah, same. I think we should ignore the costs. The 2,500,000.
So, sorry, can you repeat? I couldn't understand.
Sorry. I think same. We should build a new warehouse and ignore the costs.
Okay, so how do we call the 2.5 million that is the value of construction at the moment?
Sunk cost.
It's a sunk cost. It's a cost that we have incurred already, so it won't change. No matter what the decision, this cost has been incurred in the past. Very good. Now, we have the two options. We are looking for the future. And one option of repairing the project costs 4 million. The other option of demolishing and build a brand new warehouse costs 3 million. So the decision here should be to opt for the 3 million option because it's cheaper than the 4 million option. Very good. Let's look at now at this example. James is wondering how to use the time remaining on a machine that is the bottleneck in the production process. The machine currently has the capacity to handle one more order, and James must decide between two orders. So there's only capacity for one order, and he has two orders to decide. The first one, X133, provides a contribution margin of 12,000. And M244 provide a contribution margin of 15,000. If James uses the machine time to accept order 244, what is the opportunity cost of this decision? Who wants to answer? We have here hands up or José. You want to turn on your mic? If not José, then we have also hands up with Duarte.
If we order the M244, the opportunity cost is 12,000, and if we order the X133, the opportunity cost is 15,000.
Exactly. So if we choose for one order, the opportunity cost is the lost contribution margin from the other order. Very good. Now, second question. If James has the machine capacity to accept both orders, what are the opportunity costs of accepting both orders? We have hands up. We have here Gonçalo. If you don't want to have your hands up, you have to turn down your hands. But if you want, you can just we have now Duarte.
I think that in this case, with this information, there are no opportunity costs.
Remember, we only have opportunity cost when there is limited capacity, when we have limited resources available. There is a constraint in the availability of resources. In this now second option, if they have the capacity to accept both orders, they don't need to give up any other option. They can accept both. So there is no opportunity cost. Excellent. Very good. Any questions? No, there's no questions. So we will finish here for today. I will just want to share with you, if you follow IMA Europe on Facebook, you will see that they have available this webinar on the February 25th, which is titled Becoming a Successful Business Partner. As I talk to you, and there's available from the week one, there's a lot of resources in relation to the management accountant, controller. We talk about what is this profession about. And when we talk about management accountants, I told you, it's not that person that is just in front of the Excel, not talking to anyone. The management accountant is more and more involved in the decision-making process. He talks directly with the CEO of the organization. So it's the accountant is becoming this business partner. Okay, there is articles about business partner. I will share some with you, that you can understand the role of the management accountant, of the controller, which is an important role in the organization in terms of decision making, in terms of power in the organization. So it's a very important role. And there will be this webinar. If you want to enroll, you can just enroll there. There's the link here on the slides. When I upload the slides on Moodle, you will get the link and you can be able to enroll. But you can also follow them on Facebook. They also have some pop-up quizzes on Facebook, which you can use to practice for the final exam. Okay? Any questions?
I have one more short question. There's a question on the chat about the evaluation of the quizzes. And could you maybe answer this one very quickly?
So
like a bit before.
There's a question about evaluation of the quizzes. So in terms of the grading, okay, so the quizzes that we have, what we have done today, we have done quizzes on Moodle, and the homework, that problem that you did in pairs and you submitted on Moodle. So this has will be part of your evaluation. So it has a specific component for that percentage of your continuous evaluation on the course. And then what we did online, so what we did here online with your participation in talking, your participation on the chat, on the quizzes live here on the pool, this will have very small impact. It will have a little impact, but much smaller than the ones on Moodle. Okay? Sorry,
Professor. My question was if it depends or not if we get the answers right or not.
Yes, so your grade, if you have the answers right, the percentage will sum more than if you have the answers wrong.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, but that impact is mostly on for the ones on Moodle. Okay, that is a stronger impact on your evaluation. Okay, so you have that 20% of your grade, which is part of continuous evaluation, like quizzes, problems, etc. So on Moodle, that counts more. The class participation, it counts less in the total 20% weight. Okay. More questions? So we have here Frederick on asking on the chat if we finish the slides next week. Yes. So I will make available the slides that we covered today. Those slides that I jumped right now at the end. I will come back to them next week. Okay. I have here Yannick saying that there was technical issues on the quiz. So you can try to attempt again, okay? If you had technical issues on the quiz and you could not submit, you can still do that, okay? Anyone else with questions? No? Just to remember, last week I mentioned very briefly about the scholarship for the CMA exam. So if you think you want to have a career in the area, you can see on Moodle about the certifications. There's there the link for the CMA. You can go to the web page that there's there. You can search. You can read more about the certification, what you have to do exactly, and then later in the semester, in the course, if you decide, no, I really want to have a career in this area, then talk to me, and then we will move forward with your application to the scholarship. Okay, very good. If there's no more questions, I'll just make available the slides and optional quiz on CVP analysis for you to practice some examples. And if you have any trouble, just let me know. Otherwise, I will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
You.
Bye. Thank you.